Hi, I'm Hannah,
And I'm Lydia.
and we are a pair of bookends.
And we were just hoping that we could interrupt this episode to ask you very kindly if you would sign up to our Patreon.
Yes, if you have some spare change rattling around in your pocket, we would so appreciate it if you could go over to patreon.com/a pair of bookends where you can support our work. We have been doing this podcast for nearly 2 years now, and we wanted the opportunity to get to know some of you a little better. And via our Patreon, as well as getting exclusive benefits, you can also have the opportunities to share your own recommendations with us and to chat with us. And it's just a nice place for us to have our own little hub.
For less than a price of a coffee, you can get exclusive Patreon only benefits, such as our Patreon exclusive book club, where you get to pick the book that we read each month, and also
Early access to all podcast episodes.
and your chance to ask our authors your own questions.
So please do, if you can, sign up to our Patreon via patreon.com/a pair of bookends and support our work. We would appreciate it more than you can imagine, and it helps us hugely to bring you all the extra special stuff.
So come and officially become a bookend.
Now on to today's episode. Welcome to A Pair of Bookends, the book club you can carry anywhere. We are your hosts and hopefully your new bookish pals. I'm Hannah MacDonald.
And I'm Emma Hinds.
Plot twist! For today's episode, I am joined by friend of the pod, the powerhouse writer Emma Hinds, which you should all know by now, as she's been on twice before. Lydia is currently unable to record, unfortunately, so Emma has very kindly stepped in. Hello, Emma Hinds.
Hello, I'm back.
How do you feel?
Good, so good. Just, living my little writer dream out here in the world.
You are indeed. The last episode I recorded with you was prior to the launch of The Knowing. I think we
Yeah, it was
were
like the week of the
the week
launch.
of it was
Yeah.
because I remember I think I posted the link for the launch event and was
Mm-hmm.
like, everybody come along. And the
Yeah,
launch was great. Like we
it
never got to
was.
report back on that, but the launch was so good. Like iconic behavior from everybody involved.
Yeah, something we need to mention is that Hannah made the Knowing t-shirts that she revealed at this event with a bunch
No,
of pals.
I can't
It's
take
so
no,
cute.
it was not me, it was Sam. We must give Sam credit. Sam, who is a wonderful human being and also I believe helped a lot with very early edits of The Knowing.
Yes, he's an incredible writer and dramaturg, and
Very incredible.
yeah.
We love Sam. This is a Sam Stan podcast now.
Yeah. Anyway,
It's actually Sam was actually in charge of and I butchered it for Sam because you noticed the t-shirt that I was wearing first, and I had to be like, no, don't look, don't look, don't look. And it was too late, you'd already seen it. But yes, we did all wear the Knowing
Yeah,
t-shirts, and
it was very cute.
I have kept mine and will be wearing it for the foreseeable.
I wear mine to bed.
It's the best.
Yeah, it's the best.
You also have some exciting news
Yeah,
to
sold
share with
another
our
book.
listeners.
Sold more books. Yeah. So as people who follow me on the various socials will see, I have sold my YA, my young adult novel, Witch Lore. I've sold it to Usborne in the UK, one book for them, and then went to Wednesday Books in the United States and North American territories, 2 books.
Hooray!
Yeah.
And
So young adult fiction, here we come.
what can you share about that series?
It is about a non-binary teenage shapeshifter called Lando, who lives in contemporary Manchester
We love.
in an alternate world where witchcraft is still a thing and witches live alongside humans in the normal world and have varying degrees of power. And Lando is a teenage shapeshifter who can't shapeshift and whose girlfriend has just died. And they meet a beguiling stranger on the first day of college called Bastian, who tells them that there is a shapeshifter book that could have a resurrection spell, which could bring their girlfriend back from the dead.
You hate writing about the dead.
I
What do you mean you're writing about death and witchcraft and grief?
know,
What?
I know, I
That doesn't
know.
sound anything like you. Featuring
Nothing.
a queer cast, like
But this time for kids.
we have to teach them early.
Yeah, yeah, like the queer indoctrination for kids.
I love that so much. Do you know what that's just reminding me of? Is the video that I sent you a couple of months ago with the little girl crying.
Yeah,
You
yeah,
remember
she's
it?
so sad. Yeah, because she wants to be gay. Yeah, but you can be gay. You'll be fine. You'll be fine. We accept.
So cute.
We're
I'm
not
gonna have
mad
to
at you.
try and find it because it was so good. Okay, I'm really excited about this. When is your book projected for? Projected.
Woohoo! Yes, it sounds so fancy. Yes. So book one is coming autumn 2024. Book two will be the following year. No, 2025. Let's try that again. Book one is coming autumn 2025. Book two the same time 2026.
I actually nearly had heart failure when you said autumn 2024 then. I was like,
Can you
you're
imagine?
going to combust.
That would be a quick turnaround. That would be fast. I mean,
I
we
believe you
could
would
do
make it
it.
happen. Like,
Yeah,
I
it
have
would.
seen your work ethic many times, but I do believe that, Emma does need a rest
I
at some
might, yeah.
point. I don't know how many times I have to beg this woman to rest.
Yeah. But all I do is write about dead things. I had a call with Alice today, my agent, and we were talking about what was next. And I was like, well, I found this thing about these dead bodies, which is really interesting. And she was like, you just have a thing. You have a problem. You have a problem. I'm like, yeah, pretty much.
Yeah, slight obsession there, slightly.
Yeah. Should we
Um,
talk some culture?
oh my gosh, is she co-hosting? Is she
She's
guiding the
trying.
conversation?
Culture.
Yes, let's get on to some culture. So, this is our very delayed monthly culture roundup for March, where we chat about all of the things we've enjoyed this month, from TV to podcasts and films to books. We'll be deep diving into all the things we've been consuming. Before actually we start, we need to know, Emma, what are you currently reading?
Yeah, I am currently reading Meet Me at the Surface by Jodie Matthews from Fourth Estate Books. Jodie is now a mate of mine, which is fun.
That was so mank of you. What is going on? Mate of mine.
You can't laugh at me.
I am your mank friend. I'm very proud.
Yeah, so Jodie is a debut novelist like me. Meet Me at the Surface came out, I think, maybe like 2 weeks or a week after The Knowing came out. So we're kind of in the same little boat, and we are doing an event together next week in London, which is going to be really fun. So I am really excited to be getting into her book. I can't wait. It's going to be fun. It's like Cornish folklore, folk horror. It's got it's gay. It's got everything I like. So I'm really excited.
I'm
Yeah.
gonna have to steal your copy.
Yeah, I've
This
got proof copy. Yeah.
this event. Oh, so you got proof copy? Sorry, who is she?
You
What?
get like a billion proof copies. Every book I borrow from you is a proof copy.
What is this event that you speak of, Emma
Oh,
Hinds?
yes, very exciting. Next Thursday, I will be in That There London,
That there.
That Day London, down to the capital of the South, as we like to call it. The event is called Coming Out of the Cage, a queer genre panel at Waterstones Piccadilly.
Okay.
Vibes. Thursday, the 11th of April at 6:30 at the big Waterstones in Piccadilly. And I'm really excited because I'm on a panel with some people who are fucking superstars. And I'm just like rocking up, being like, my publicity team must be
Please.
fucking awesome because I am the stray dog who wandered into this pedigree event.
No, you are such a superstar. Behave yourself.
So other names that you might want to come and see if you're in London and I'm not enough of a draw. Natasha Pulley with her new book, The Mars House. Julia Armfield with Private Rights. Alison Rumfitt talking about brainworms, and Jodie Matthews talking about Meet Me at the Surface.
So exciting.
Me and Jodie last night were talking about it and we were like, it's a genre panel. So we have to figure out which genre we are because nobody's told us. Like we're all clearly representing a genre, but we don't know who we are. We think I might be historical fiction, but we're not sure.
Yeah.
So
Well, I
yeah.
mean, I think Waterstones are confused about what genre you sit in
Oh yeah, all
because
the time.
every time I go into one, I'm like, where is Emma? Was
Well,
she, was
it's
she in
not
new books?
helped.
Was she in fantasy? Where is she going?
Not helped by the fact that Hannah finds where I am and then moves me to the front of the store. So they're probably running around being like,
So
I
sorry.
swear I put this person in the proper place. And now they're
I
just
I did lose
idiots.
my shit when you were front and center next to Anne Wright. And
Oh,
Anne Wright?
yeah.
Anne Wright, excuse me.
And then, right, yeah.
Yeah.
That is a very cool position to be
And
in.
that was not my doing. That was Waterstone's doing. Thank you very much. As you
Yeah.
should be, front and center. Thank you.
Well, there are still tickets available, but not that many because they've sold like 70 tickets
I
or
can
something.
imagine. I
Yeah.
can
So
imagine. I'm so
um
excited for you.
it's well exciting. It's well exciting. So yeah, that's a long way of saying I am currently reading Jodie Matthews in preparation for our event together because I like to read all the books of the people that I do events with. What are you reading, Hannah?
There we go.
I did it.
So the book I'm reading is The Voyager by Paul Carlucci, which is out on the 18th of April and published by Swift Press, and it's their lead debut of 2024. It's historical fiction and it's set in 1830s Montreal. At the moment, it's very chaotic, lots of men fighting, guns being produced. This is probably doing a disservice to the writer. There is a really beautiful relationship in there, a beautiful gay relationship in there that I was enjoying reading most of all because I was more interested in that than the guns and violence, etc.
Yeah.
Very typical of me. But I'm really enjoying it so far. And yeah, I can't reveal much else because more will be said on that on the podcast.
That's
But
exciting though. Is it
yeah,
you're not the most historical fiction person I
I'm
know. Like
not.
if I had to subscribe you to a book club, for instance, it would be contemporary literary fiction. Like that's what you would subscribe to. So
You know me so well.
it's always fun to see you reading historical fiction that I didn't write.
It's always very scary. I have to make lots of notes when I read historical fiction because I get quite confused. And it's weird because at the start of it, I'm like, I'm never going to understand this. And then like it gets into it and I'm like, okay, right, I understand now.
It's why it's
I
so important, like for historical fiction, to have like those human threads in it. Otherwise,
mm,
you get so easy to like lose people
yeah.
and lose their interest if you don't have a story that really compels things and moves things forward.
And this is why you're the writer, because you articulated that so well. And that is probably why I was drawn to the relationship and
Yeah,
the human thread, as you put it, rather
yeah,
than the chaotic kind of war situation that was going on. And I was like,
yeah.
what is happening? What is going on? Like, what army is this? What brigade is this? What do you mean?
Who do
Where
you
are
fight
we?
for? What is that stick in your hand? No,
Like,
that's totally
frantically
fair.
making notes of each character. Like, okay, this is this person.
I'm so bad at writing action. I suck at it so much. I have no time for swords and shit. I'm really bad
Swords
at
and
it.
shit.
I
Could
have
that be the
more time
title
for
of a
shit
book?
than I do for swords, definitely. Yeah, but I was going to say, I'm not the only writer on this call. You're a writer too. And I do think that your preferences speaks to what you like to write as well. That you
Mm,
like to write human interactions and how people are in relationships with each other, especially inside like really getting into the nitty-gritty claustrophobia of like families and things like that. So
mhm.
I think it's kind of an expansion of what you like to write in yourself.
You just made me sound so good.
That's Hannah is actually a well good writer and
Well, good.
a well good writer. And this has maybe not been made clear so far on this podcast, but I would recommend. I would recommend
I'm actually so embarrassed.
trying to get her to write a book right now. It's going really well.
It's not going well, guys. It's not going well. No, I do actually need to sort my life out and write things. But yeah, Emma has tried to persuade me several times to have a writing session. I'm gonna say
Oh, I think
this.
persuade is like that's not a fair description. Hannah has a million jobs, so it's fair that there's not time in a week necessarily to set aside for writing, whereas I just write all the time. That's all I do. So I have more than enough time for writing. But
Icons
yeah,
only. That's
Yeah,
going to be me one day. We're
yeah,
manifesting it for you. We're manifesting it for me.
yeah,
I'm going to
yeah.
be acting and writing and just living that
Yeah,
creative
this is
bubble
what
life.
I am trying to say on like everything that I go on at any point. I'm just like, if you are a creative person, if you're listening or watching me do something, if you're a creative person and you find time in your week, even if it's like 10 minutes just to write something on your notes app on the way to work or on the way home,
Mhm.
or to like do a voice note to yourself in the car, or even just like read a book, like you are killing it. You are winning. Any kind of creativity that you can put into the world it's just amazing.
Great advice.
Got to encourage
Fantastic. Okay, we need to talk about other things that aren't ourselves,
more
unfortunately.
culture.
Things that have happened this month that we are excited about. I think we need to start off with a big, we're talking about historical fiction. This is a big historical moment. Culture.
I know what's coming. It's unacceptable to talk about it this way, but go for it.
This is the release of Beyonce Knowles' first country album, Cowboy Carter.
Can we call it a country album though? Can we call it a
Emma
country album?
Hinds.
Sorry, I'm going to be that person.
Oh
I'm
my
not
God.
saying it's not good and I don't enjoy it. I have some questions
Okay,
about
what are your questions? Let's hear them.
I I have some questions about the originality of the country aspect of this album,
Okay.
because I feel like a lot of leverage is coming from other country artists. And I think I had pretty high hopes for the country album because I like country music. Well, actually, what I really like in terms of American music is folk music. So I was hoping for something that lent on that barrier a little
Mm-hmm.
bit. But I don't think it necessarily met my expectations. But there were things about it that I did really like. I really liked like the gospel influences that were
Mm-hmm.
so strong, like any songs that really had like those moments. I liked the song Daughter a lot because I thought the interest there was a lot of interesting stuff going on with the Italian influences from that.
Mm-hmm.
But I just don't have time for Beyonce's version of Jolene. I'm just not having it, sorry.
Oh my God. Okay, we're gonna fall out over this because I fucking loved that cover of Jolene.
Okay.
Loved
Is
it.
that your best song on the album, do you think?
No,
Do you think that's the best song? What's your best song on the album?
my favorite songs on the album, I think Texas Hold'em is gonna be probably my favorite.
That is still a banger. And I
Still a
think,
banger.
yeah.
So good. I loved Two Most Wanted with Miley Cyrus, and I'm
See, I
not
really
a massive Miley fan.
I find the opposite way. So I
Okay.
really liked it because of Miley, because I love
Okay.
Miley's country stuff just will get me every time.
But yeah, I thought that was great. I also loved, I did love Jolene. I'm sorry.
It's all right.
I loved Dolly Parton's lead into that song. I thought it like actually made me laugh out loud when I heard it
Yeah, it was
because it was
cute.
just like such a big fuck you to the haters. It was like, don't come for me because Dolly
Mm.
signed this off. And I loved the twist on Jolene. I loved it. And like you said, like the gospel aspects of everything,
Yeah.
like the ending of the Jolene cover is so, so good, in my humble
Mm.
opinion. There was also another one. I did really like Levi's Jeans, which is the Beyonce and Post Malone song. I
I
thought it was very sexy.
I was generally more here for the stuff which was solo,
Okay.
but that didn't have other people on it, except for I quite like Spaghetti.
Yeah.
I liked that.
What about
Um,
Yaya? Yaya?
yeah, yeah. I mean, I think in terms of the her solo songs on there, I think 16 Carriages has been a great song for a while.
It's so
Like,
good.
so
That is a very good
that
one.
one was good. And like I said, I like Daughter. I quite liked Alligator Tears, but yeah, I think I just had different expectations of what it would look like, but that's okay. Like, I've got Lemonade. I'm not losing out in my life in terms of Beyonce content.
Lemonade is a very good album.
It's the best still, I believe. It's still the best album
Yeah,
that she's produced.
I think between that, Lemonade is a work of art in and of
Mm,
itself, but in terms of like my favorite album, I'd say it's between Lemonade and was the album called Flawless?
I don't know.
Mm, the one that had Partition and everything on it. It was
Oh,
Flawless.
okay.
It was Flawless and Partition, but I don't know what the actual album was called. But that album, and I went to that concert and lost my tiny mind. So,
Tiny Tiny Mind.
tiny,
Yeah,
tiny mind.
that was it. Like that was a great tour as well. The one that the tour. Well, I can't remember what that tour was called, but it was a great tour.
No, I think that it was called the Flawless album because I bought a black jumper from the tour with with
Yeah.
Flawless written across in pink. So I think that's why I'm thinking it is. But I remember that song off the
Mm,
album, but who knows? Anyway, this is a books podcast, so we will stop talking about Beyonce for now.
yeah.
We should talk about the Women's Prize for Fiction longlist.
Let's talk about it.
What are your thoughts and feelings? Is there any books on there that you are eager to read?
Yeah, I'm
Is there anything you feel
pretty.
missed out on the list?
I mean, I
You?
think it's me. What were they thinking? It's always interesting to see what ends up on the Women's Prize, and then also to compare it sometimes to the Booker Prize, and they're
Hmm.
often very, very different, obviously, because the Booker is not just women. In terms of what's on there, I'm pretty interested in The Maiden because I think it's kind of the big historical fiction on there, The Maiden by Kate Foster. And it speaks as well to a really interesting trend in historical fiction at the
Hmm.
moment, which is women who commit crimes,
Yeah.
which is really, really popular at the moment. So it'll be interesting to see that kind of play out. And I am interested to read I'm interested to read them all, let's be honest. Like you kind of want to know what the buzz is.
Hmm.
I generally don't really read, I'm not that into thrillers unless they're kind of in a very historical setting. So there are a couple on there that maybe aren't going to really interest me that much, but I am very interested in the Wren, and I've had a look at it. I have held it in my hand, the Wren by Anne Enright, and I like the way it looks on the page and
Hmm.
what it's doing with terms of form and things like that. And I was gonna borrow, you have a copy of Soldier Sailor, don't
I
you?
do,
By Claire
yes.
Kilroy. So I
Hmm.
was gonna borrow that because that seemed interesting to me. But come on, what's your top choice from the Women's Prize long list?
Well, firstly, congratulations to two previous podcasts.
Oh, who
Me
else?
Megan Nolan, author of Ordinary Human Failings, and
Ah,
obviously Anne Enright, who is an Irish powerhouse, as many Irish authors mentioned when we posted that we'd had Anne Enright on. Anne Enright on. Can't even say her
mm.
name today. They lost their minds over it and were like on Twitter. I think Susanna Dickey was like, "This is iconic," and
Yeah.
it felt iconic. So yeah, really happy that those were on there. As Emma mentioned, do have a copy of Soldier Sailor by Claire Kilroy. I'm hearing lots of great things about that. I've not read it yet, but it is sat on my bedside table. I'm very eager to get to it soon. Pandora Sykes has also mentioned a lot about that book, and I trust Pandora's recommendations a lot. I'm really excited for Enter Ghost by Isabella Hamad, who is a Palestinian author, and it's set in, I'm going to butcher what I say about this, but there's some kind of like theatre aspect, like people working in a theatre in Palestine, I believe.
That's
Um,
cool. That sounds really
which,
cool.
yeah, which I thought was very up my street. But let me just get up.
Ooh, I've got it if you want it.
Yeah, go on. Read out what it's about.
Oh yeah, Sonia, an actress escaping a disastrous affair with her director in London, visits her sister Haneen, an academic in Haifa, and gets tapped to play Gertrude in an Arabic production of Hamlet in the West Bank, directed by Haneen's friend Mariam. Their Hamlet is a pop star who grew up in a camp near Ramallah. The cast range from 48ers, Palestinian citizens inside Israel, to refugee camp residents. Mariam wants to cast someone from Gaza in vain. The production is troubled from the start. Its funding is tied to Mariam's brother, a politician who has come under censure. Actors are called up for interrogation or detained at checkpoints. The set is confiscated by the authorities. Armed soldiers show up on opening night. At every step, it seems the show might not go on. It looks really cool.
It sounds so good. So I think when we go on your birthday book trip, I might have to get myself a copy of that.
Yeah, I mean, I think the Hamlet aspect really
Hmm.
interests me, definitely. That's
Yeah,
that's a very cool trope to be exploring.
very exciting. But there's an affair in there. There's
Oh, you love an affair.
love and affair. There's actors and theatre and politics and family dynamics and very much here for that. So yeah, really excited to read that. I've heard a lot of great things about Brotherless Night by Vivi Ganesh Anathan. That was a really butchered pronunciation. I'm so sorry. Heard a lot of good things about that. Also heard a lot of great things about River East, River West
I've
by,
heard,
yeah,
things about that too.
lots of great things. Western Lane by Chetna Maru. I've got a copy of that. Haven't read it yet, but that was also on the Booker last year, I think.
Really?
Yeah, it was on, yeah, the Booker Prize 2023 long list. I've just got it up now. It was on there.
Western Lane by Chetna Maru. After an 11-year-old Gopi's mother dies, her pa enrolls her and her sisters, Kush and Mona, in a strict squash regimen. It is Gopi, though, who takes to squash like a fish in water. She's able to channel her love of the sport and her newfound friendship with Ged to work through her unspeakable grief. That's interesting.
Yeah.
I honestly cannot imagine ever writing a book about a sport, but I don't know enough about any sports.
It seems to be a bit of a theme at the moment, like a recurring theme in like new fiction. There's that Headshot by Rita Bullwinkle, I think the name is. I know Lydia's read that and said it was really, really good, but I'm hearing lots of people hype that up, and that's about female boxers in America.
Yeah. I think
Um,
if I was going to write about any kind of athleticism, it would be like dance or gymnastics
yeah.
or something like that. Ice skating is probably quite interesting to write about.
There is also And Then She Fell by Alicia Elliott, which I am very intrigued by. So this says, on the surface, Alice is exactly where she should be in life. She's just given birth to a beautiful baby girl. Her ever-charming husband, an academic whose area of study is conveniently her own Mohawk culture. Is that how you say it? Mohawk culture?
Mohawk culture.
Is nothing but supportive, and they've moved into a home in a wealthy neighbourhood, but strange things have started happening. Alice finds herself hearing voices she can't explain and speaking with things that should not be talking back to her, all while her neighbour's passive aggression begins to morph into something far more threatening. Told in Alice's raw and darkly funny voice and infused with Native American myth and legend, And Then She Fell is it's a wild, fierce novel.
That sounds really good.
Yeah, I feel like you would like that.
Yeah, I'm interested in that. The Women's Prize, exciting things on the horizon. Have
There
you got any
are.
predictions for the shortlist?
I think Soldier Sailor will be on the shortlist. I feel like Anne Enright will be on the shortlist. I feel like Enter Ghost, the one I mentioned before, will also be
Yeah.
on the shortlist.
We'll have to read more and see what our predictions are
Yeah.
at
What
the
are you
end.
predicting?
I think Enter Ghost.
Yeah.
I think it's probably a good shout.
Mm-hmm.
I do think the Wren because it's doing some really interesting things with form, and
Yeah.
I think probably from the perspective of the Women's Prize, they want a shortlist which has a distinct level of diversity inside it in terms of the stories, not just the stories that are being told, but how they're being told.
Yeah.
But
I
it'll be
think
really
maybe
interesting.
the one that you mentioned, I think, might also be a shout. Maiden.
Yeah.
Something
The
like
Maiden,
that.
maybe.
I feel like.
I'm always interested to see if historical fiction ever gets beyond the long list, because sometimes it really doesn't. So yeah, interesting.
Interesting.
All these wonderful women writers doing such amazing work, and we get to read it. How
Iconic
lucky are
behaviour.
we?
The last thing that I want to talk about before we get onto our recommendations is very brief, and that is that there is a theory online.
This is like when you were like, what are your theories about Kate Middleton? And I was like, she's probably poorly. And you were like, I think she's dead, and then felt terrible.
Oh, yes, now I feel terrible about that. Yeah. The Kate Middleton conspiracies.
At least you were not alone. Like,
yeah, yeah. I mean, I feel like the PR around that was terrible. There was a lot of terrible decisions being made, not from Kate herself, obviously, but I think the Palace got it wrong for this one, and they said too early on that that her operation went fine, there was nothing troubling, everything was great.
Yeah.
And obviously we, the public, knew that. I've gone into a politics podcast apparently, but we were told that Charles had cancer. When they said that everything was well with Kate, we obviously thought, okay, everything's fine. So why do all these weird things keep happening? So yeah, it just felt like there was something that went wrong somewhere. So yes, I did fall
Yeah.
into the trap of the Kate Middleton conspiracy.
Well, we have to talk
Sorry.
about it, because it was a big part of everybody's march, wasn't it? Like it was,
It
it was,
was.
it
It
was
was. It was a big part
headlines
of it.
everywhere.
Yeah, it was. It was. It's really sad, and I really feel for her. Nobody should have to go through cancer, and I am really sad for the family, especially for her having to deal with that and her children. But I believe that she's got the support that she needs around her. I think you made a valid point about women and their bodies being left alone. But also, yeah, I do think there was a failure in terms of like
Mm.
the PR around that situation. It wasn't handled in the best way.
Yeah,
And
I
that's
wish I
why.
could sit here and be like, yes, I was the respectful one in the situation. The truth is, I just really don't care about the royals enough. Like that was everyone was like, "What do you think about this?" I was like, "I
Don't
think it's
care.
just I just don't care. Just leave her alone."
That's so fair. That's so fair.
But yeah, what else do we need to talk about?
We need to, well, the thing I wanted to speak about, the online theory,
Mm,
was I haven't read any books by Emily Henry. I've
okay.
got the Beach Read book, but I haven't read it. But there is knowledge that her book, Book Lovers, is being adapted. Now, there is a theory circulating online that in that adaptation, the leads are going to be played by Paul Mescal and Ayo Edebiri, who is the incredible actor who recently was in the film Bottoms, which I've not watched yet, but she's most known for her role in The Bear. We love
Oh,
her. She's an icon.
I
Um,
loved The Bear. That was my favorite TV show of last year.
so good. But she's incredible. She's like arguably I think the lead is supposed to be Jeremy Allen White, but
Mm.
she's arguably a lead as
She,
well.
yeah, she just knocks it out of the park, doesn't she?
100% she's so good. But apparently, this theory has stemmed from so Paul Mescal and Ayo Edebiri shared an Instagram story on St. Patrick's Day and was like, Happy St. Patrick's Day. And it was a picture of just the two of them sat together. And Emily Henry screenshotted that story and shared it to her own story and put a heart. Why
This
would
is
why would you do that if you weren't involved with those people? Like it's just so random.
maybe she's got a crush on them both.
Maybe, but also I would like to believe because Paul Mescal has also said that he would really like to do a rom-com, and you could say there's definitely a romance aspect to All of Us Strangers, but it's not a rom-com, let's be honest. We
Mm.
spent half that film crying and holding hands.
We did. It's true. I'm scrolling the Insta. I do not see. Was this the story? Because it's definitely not on her posts anymore.
No, it's not in her post. It was on her Instagram story. And then the
Uh,
Shameless podcast, the Australian podcast that I'm obsessed with, they
mm.
shared the theory onto their Instagram. And I was like, I am so in. All signs point to this. If them two join forces and do a rom-com together, I will 1,000%. What is wrong with me today? 1,000% be down for watching that.
Well, interesting. On the 28th of March, she posted a thing, Book Lovers movie set with After Sun producers.
Mm-hmm.
And Paul Mescal was in After Sun.
Exactement.
You're
My
so ready for
theory is
this. You're
continuing
so
to be
ready for
proven.
this. Serious.
I'm gonna have
In
to read
about
Emily Henry.
in about 2 months, I'm gonna get a message that's just a photo, a screenshot of this announcement with just "I told you so" underneath in
That doesn't
capital.
sound like me.
That's
I
amazing.
did see today Florence Pugh and Andrew Garfield on the set of a romance film that they're doing,
Oh,
and
I live for that.
I do feel like that'll be my entire personality.
Hmm.
We should probably get into our recommendations because we've been talking for a long, long time.
Yeah, fair. Fair, fair,
Okay,
fair.
so
All right.
start us off,
What
What is your first recommendation for the monthly culture roundup?
I'm gonna start with music.
Mm, let's hear it.
Just to because we've talked about Beyonce. I've been enjoying the EP from Hosier Unheard, which has got 4 tracks on it, which is
Mm.
just really nice and chill. That's been like giving me good vibes this week. My friend um in the States sent a link to me to let me know it was out with like the tagline, I would suck this man's dick like a cannoli. And I was like, yeah, let's let's hear this then. That's a good recommendation for music. Based on the quality of his voice, I should add. I mean, I think he is also attracted to Hosier, but yeah, it's mainly about voice.
That is the best phrase I've heard in my life.
What is your first
Recommendation?
from the month of March?
My first recommendation is one I really want everybody to go and listen to this. So it's not a niche recommendation in terms of the podcast itself. It's Desert Island Discs. Everybody knows what Desert Island Discs is. I love it so much. It's a great podcast. I feel like it's a very much like a comfort listen for me. There's been 2 or 3 different hosts in the time that I've listened to Desert Island Discs, but they all have the most soothing voices. They always have the best interview styles, the best questions. The guests always seem really relaxed in their company, and I think like the best stories come out of that. And it's always great to listen to music choices and the stories of people's lives, etc. This episode was Jamie Dornan, who has done lots of things. He's in the Tourist, which is a BBC series. He played Christian Grey in 50 Shades of Grey. He's done lots of great things. I've just completely forgotten everything else that he's done. He was also in
He was in Belfast.
That's what I was going to say. It was the
Yeah.
black and white film I was trying to think of, yeah.
With-
So he's in
yeah.
Belfast with...
Catriona Bale, is it? Like she was in Outlander.
Right, okay. Yes.
Yeah.
I've not watched that yet. But it was honestly like, it is one of my favourite episodes I've ever listened to of Desert Island Discs, which is why I've had to shout about it. And yes, I do have favourite episodes of that podcast. My other favourite of that podcast is Ian Wright, who is a national treasure. But that's all I'll say on Ian Wright. So Jamie Dornan, I even wrote notes for this episode because I enjoyed it so much. So I'm going to fly through those. But he was talking about the anxiety and self-loathing that actors face, and he was asked
Something you
about
could not relate to at all.
not relate
obviously.
to whatsoever.
No, completely
And-
unrelated content.
And the host, I think the host is Lauren Laverne now. I want to say Lauren Laverne.
She's amazing. I love her.
So great. But she was like, do you struggle with that? And he was like, I'm riddled with it.
Mm.
And I was like, yes, preach. There was lots of really beautiful stories about like his childhood and his relationship with his mom and dad. He talks a lot about being homesick when he's working away because he's from Ireland. He talks a lot about feeling sick when he's away from home. His mum died from cancer when he was 14, and I had to re-listen to that moment because it made me so emotional. But yeah, his mum died when he was 14, and he does get quite emotional talking about it and gets quite choked up. And the song that he chose on Desert Island Discs to talk about that period in his life was Bridge Over Troubled Water by Simon and Garfunkel.
Aw.
And he said he heard, after his mum died, he heard that song for the first time with his dad, and they felt like the song had been written for them. And very weirdly, I listened to a cover of Bridge Over Troubled Water when driving home from the hospital after my granddad died. And it was because I didn't feel able to cry properly in front of everybody. So I wanted like a big sob on the way home.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that was the
Sometimes
song
you got
to make
time
me
it.
sob.
Yeah,
So whilst I was in the car, I just cried it out to Bridge Over Troubled
Yeah.
Water. And I think it's such a beautiful song. So yeah, that episode really got me. He's had like quite a lot of like really sad things happen to him. Like 4 of his friends died in a car crash the summer after his mum died. His dad died during COVID, and was it during COVID? That might be a lie. But basically he was away filming when his dad died, and he was in this like big contract, and he couldn't get out of it and couldn't go home to see his dad. So there was lots of like really sad emotional things, but I didn't expect him to be such like the person that he came across as. I don't know why, but I think because he played Christian Grey, I expected him to have a bit of an ego, and he just didn't. And I just really enjoyed that episode. It was very beautiful.
Yeah, it sounds like it was meaningful as well. It's really nice when something that you come across that you just sort of maybe listen for fun and just kind of something to do on a drive. It's really nice when something ends up being incredibly meaningful and sort of speaks to you in a spiritual and emotional way. It's really
Yeah,
cool.
I would very much recommend that episode to everybody. Emma, what is your next recommendation?
Okay, she's looking at a list. I think I'll do a film. Have you got a film lined up?
I do have a
For
film
TV?
lined up.
Yeah, I'm doing American fiction. Yes, based on the 2001 novel Erasure by Percival Everett. It stars Jeffrey White, Tracy Ellis Ross, who like kills it. But if you are coming to this movie just for Tracy Ellis Ross, then you need to you need to rethink just because she's not in it for the whole thing.
Mhm.
Sterling K. Brown, John
Love
Lapisse,
him.
Erica Alexander, Leslie Uggams, Adam Brody, and Keith David. And it's a stellar cast, and it's directed by Cord Jefferson and screenplays by Cord Jefferson. And it really shows the way that the script and the screenplay and the direction really work together in like this amazing, amazing way. So it is about a African American upper class writer called Thelonious Monk Ellison, who is a professor in Los Angeles, and his novels are generally have been having this reception where they're kind of really well thought of, but he's not making a lot of money off them. And he publishers are like rejecting his work for not being Black enough. So when he enters into financial troubles, particularly because of his mother's declining health and other family situations, which I won't go into, which are kind of like little spoilers, he decides to write what he quote unquote calls a Black book. He writes a satirical novel called My Pathology with an F. And it's just really interesting because he writes it as a satire, but his agent sells it straight. And the literary world just eats it up. And he ends up having to pretend to be a different version of himself in order to be acceptably the person who wrote this book. And it's very clever and very witty, very, very funny. If you are a writer, like it's a little agonizing at times when it shines a light on like just the utter ludicrousness of the business. There's this amazing bit where they talk about the different books you write being like different Johnny Walker whiskies. And his agent is talking about how Johnny Walker produces these whiskies. It's all the same, it's all the same brand, but they're marketed at different levels and they're worth different amounts of money. And he's like, Thelonious, you write like Johnny Walker Black, like the most expensive label, you write up here. But if you want to make big bucks, you have to write down here. You have to write for Johnny Walker Red or whatever is the lowest label. And it's just like this, it's perfect. It's a perfect, it's a perfect encapsulation of any kind of creative industry, the difference between writing for yourself and writing for commerce, or performing for yourself and performing for commerce, or this idea of the difference between like a passion project and a commercial project. And it's just like a perfect moment. And if you were in any creative industry, you'll be sitting there going, oh my God, this is exactly what it's like, agonizing. But it's, incredibly funny, incredibly satirical. The performances are unbelievable. And Hannah needs to watch it because I think she's going to love it.
I'm very excited to watch this. Very, very excited. My next recommendation is a film that I know that you have watched as well. And that is Poor Things. It is genuinely the most exciting cinema I've seen in a long, long time. Emma Stone absolutely deserved that Oscar. I thought she was incredible in her role as Bella Baxter. I can't even imagine how much fun she had playing that role. I think that would be like a dream role.
I think it's such a good role. It's so interesting as well because I think a lot of people online were coming for the film. There's a really interesting conversation if you have time or you fancy it in a Guardian piece from like 16 different film critics all about this particular movie. And the question of what is it feminist enough or what makes it feminist really comes up over and over again. And there's so many hot takes, like it's so polarizing.
I definitely need to read this because I've heard quite a lot about it.
But it's so interesting. And I think it's really helpful to hold in mind that like Emma Stone was a producer on this movie. Like she made a lot of the creative choices for herself. And you're right, her performances are just astonishing.
Honestly, so incredible. Like I don't actually think there's much to criticize about this film, and people can come for me if they want, but I thought it was so engaging, so exciting, so fun. It had lots of interesting things to say. I laughed out loud a lot. I was shocked a lot, but I really thoroughly enjoyed it. I watched it on Disney Plus. Didn't watch it at the cinema really obsessively, but watched it on Disney Plus, and I was really worried that would kind of take away from it. Feels like it's a big screen film.
It is beautiful on the big screen.
I can imagine
so much work on like the backgrounds to create this like neo steampunk
Yes.
watercolor vibe. If you've seen it, those are all the right words. And it's funny because some people on the internet have been like, oh, all of the backgrounds AI, all of this thing, and they're not. Like, it's all, loads of it is model work, loads of it is painting, and it does have that really weird kind of vibe that is beautiful on the big screen. But I'm glad it still felt good to you on a small screen.
It did, and I find it very difficult to watch a film at home. I feel like there's too many distractions around me. I'm like wanting to check my phone. I'm wanting to like, I don't know, if we eat a meal whilst we're watching something, I feel like once we finish that, like I want to move the plates out the way or like go and get a drink, or like it's very easy to use the pause option. But I did not want to move at all from this screen. Like I was totally absorbed.
And isn't it so fun just to watch Mark Ruffalo having the best time?
Yes.
Like I just love his performance. He's doing this incredibly funny, fussy little man, and he has all of these silly little moments where he just goes full throated. At some points it's almost like he's staring directly down the lens of the camera in just kind of bewildered astonishment at everything that's happening to him. And he's wearing like a girdle most of the way through the movie, just like this vain, fussy guy, and he's just so funny. His physical comedy in that is almost just unprecedentedly funny, really. We need to get Mark Ruffalo more comedy roles.
I thought you were going to say we need to get Mark Ruffalo on the podcast. Poor Things, great. That's all we've got to say.
We love Poor
Really
Things.
loved it. Also, that's what I just want to say. Very excited that I cannot pronounce the director's name. Will you pronounce it for me?
Yeah, once I've looked it up. Yorgos Lanthimos.
Yorgos Lanthimos and Emma Stone are collaborating again, and there's a film coming out in the summer, I think either June or July time, with Emma Stone starring.
That's cool.
Yeah, I think she's also producing as well.
Yeah. Fun random fact about Yorgos. Like, he's known for doing these kind of cool and weird movies, and he's done quite a few that would be like considered like a lot like horror and dark. He loves Friends, the TV show Friends. Something Emma Stone explained in the press tour for Poor Things. He's like a Friends fanatic. He can do trivia from like every single episode.
That's so
Isn't that crazy? It just goes to show that like just because you're creating something doesn't necessarily mean that that's what your input is. Like your input and output are not always the same. But yeah.
I love that for him.
Yeah, I love that. Love that for him.
What is your next recommendation?
Okay, I'm going to do a book now. Do you have a book?
I do have a book.
Okay, let's do the books. Books. I read quite a lot of books this month.
You did?
Because I have a big event and it's hard to choose one. So what I've done is I've chosen a book and then I've chosen a poetry collection. Those are two of my recommendations. So I'll do the novel first, which is Private Rights by Julia Armfield from Fourth Estate. Which
so
is
jealous.
Yeah, coming out June 11th. I really had a good time reading this. Julia is just, for me, she writes the perfect level of horror, because I also read Brainworms by Alison Rumfitt this month, which is already out. And that is like so much horror that I can't actually physically read parts of it. Whereas Julia Armfield is like the right level of horror for me, which I think is, says more about me than it does about Julia, I would say. Shall I pull up a synopsis? Taken from the Waterstones website. From the author of the acclaimed Our Wives Under the Sea comes a breathlessly imaginative and insightful novel set at the end of the world as three sisters gather to administer their late architect father's estate. I think something that I really like about it is that it is set at the end of the world, but the end of the world feels so much like now, the way she writes it. The admin of life is just going on. People are just adjusting to there are lots of books about the end of the world. So one I really like is The End We Start From.
Yes, Megan Hunter.
But in The End We Start From, you come into the book in the crisis, right? Everything's at crisis point. Everybody's having to move. The world is changing really rapidly. In Private Rights, the world has been changing at a pretty steady pace for a while now, getting smaller and smaller and smaller, and life is changing. And the way she imagines the end of the world in this particular scenario, or at least the end of the world for these characters where they're living, is flooding. And it doesn't say that it's set in London, but I feel like it's London.
Mm-hmm.
And parts of London are just slowly disappearing. And it's in the little details how, people are using the top floors of buildings, how people are using water taxis to get around, how nobody's seen the sun. Everybody's got vitamin D deficiency because there's not enough sunshine. Everybody's going to work and everybody's tired because they're not getting enough sleep because they've got not getting enough vitamin D. Nobody can get eggs. It's
No
the
eggs.
normality things of it are what really make it terrifying in a way. And yet she has these very humorous and funny characters, and you're going to love it because it's about three sisters and it's about the bonds between them. And it's interesting as well because it's about two sisters who have the same mum and dad, and then a much younger sister, like 10 or 15 years younger, who has a different mum, which is
my younger
yeah,
sister.
it's a similar family dynamic to what you have. It's also similar to what I have, but in reverse, like I'm the younger, whereas you're the older. And I feel like that's a family dynamic that doesn't get played out as much, is the big age gaps. Like there's a big age gaps between me and my older brother and sister compared to my younger brother and sister. So there's like 12 years between me and my older sister, 14 years between me and my older brother. Whereas my younger siblings, there's like 5 years between us. And I think it's interesting how she plays out how different a childhood perspective can be with that much age between, how the youngest sister's perspective of their family is so different from even the middle sister's perspective or the older sister's perspective. And I think that's something it's not really examined as much in sister dynamics. So it's really fun. Also, everybody's gay, which I love. I love writing worlds where everybody's queer, and that's always really fun. She just has it into the normality of it. And I also think it's interesting because sometimes queer authors write from this perspective of like towards the end of the world, people are going to get more radical in the sense that people are going to hate more. And I think sometimes the projection for that is like people like Alison Rumfitt sometimes write in that model, this idea that we'll become more and more divided. Whereas Julia Armfield seems to be writing in this idea that actually maybe people will just care less and less and less about things like queer identities and gender because they're worried about living in a room where water could come in at any moment and kill them. So it's interesting. It's a good book. I'm excited for you to read it.
I am so excited to read this. You don't understand.
Tell me what book that you recommend that I'm going to be excited to read.
You are going to be excited to read because you had a quick scan through it already. It is Annie Bot by Sierra Gray, which was sent to me via my Bookstagram by Borough Press, which is very exciting. Annie Bot is out now, so people can buy it, which is great. It was also one of the Jimmy Fallon book club long list picks. They were trying to narrow down from like 16 books or something for Jimmy Fallon. So it's great that it's getting so much coverage because it is a genuinely great debut novel. And I always think it's great for a debut author to receive that level of coverage. Very well deserved. It's about a robot who
Let's be specific. It's about a sex bot.
It's about a
sex bot.
It is about a sex bot. So this sex bot is bought for the purposes of this man who lives in New York, and he basically wants a relationship with said sex bot. So he wants this bot not only for sex but also for sort of like the girlfriend experience. It was such a great book. It was told from the perspective of this sex bot. I was in a play a couple of years ago where it was a two-hander where there was a sex robot and there was me playing the wife of the man who owned the sex robot.
I remember, yeah.
So it was really cool to read this in novel form and explore from the perspective of this robot. I don't think it's a perspective that I've read about before, but I thought it was so fascinating. It brought so much into question about like power dynamics and relationships, the sort of ethics around sex robots, and there's this kind of whole belief that they don't have feelings because they are robots. There's a big conversation going on globally at the moment, especially in creative industries, about AI and how that's taken over. So it was just a very timely book. But as the novel progresses, her awareness grows more and more, and she starts to notice that like the way he's treating her isn't exactly fair or right, but whether she can question that because she's been hired for this purpose to serve him. So there was just lots of like interesting questions in there. And yeah, I just really, really enjoyed it. It was super engaging, flew through it. It's probably a book that you would read in a day, I imagine.
Yeah.
Really, really
I
good.
started reading it on Hannah's sofa while she went to the toilet, which I think speaks to kind of the gripping nature of it. It does kind of plunge you right into this world and
100%.
this very dodgy, what by any standards we would call like a very toxic relationship. But it's hard to be like, what's toxic when
Yeah.
you're not sure that this being has true sentience. It's interesting.
And it's very contained, like it's mostly set in the apartment that they live in. So it feels very claustrophobic in that sense. And he has the power to turn her off and on at any point. So you're constantly filled with that anxiety for her. Like, is he just going to turn her off and shove her in a cupboard for however long he wants?
Yeah.
Because he has the power to do that. And it's that abusive power that I'm interested in. But it was just a really interesting take on that, on power dynamics and relationships. So yeah, would very much recommend.
It's cool as well to see like the female robot trope being written from a woman's perspective. And yeah, in that, especially in like a sci-fi world, you know, because we've seen like this robot sex slave thing, like it's been done, you know, everywhere. So it's an interesting take on it to have this claim on the interiority of the robot, which is very cool.
Yeah. What is your other book that you wanted to recommend? The
poetry
collection?
Poetry. I am going to recommend Eleanor Amongst the Saints by my friend Rachel Mann. And I'm not recommending it just because Rachel is a friend of mine. I'm recommending it because it's just incredible. It's such an incredible piece of work. And at the core of it, it's about bodies. It's about how it feels to live in a body that's transgressive. And Rachel brings a lot of her own experience, not just as a trans person, but also as a person who occupies often a transgressive space. Rachel is an archdeacon in the Church of England, as well as being a trans woman. So she's very often objectified from the outside, made the point of rhetoric. And she really brings just so much dimensionality to what she's writing. And I loved it as a person who loves kind of historical stuff as well, because a large portion of it is dedicated to this character of Eleanor, who is based on a real person who lived in medieval times and has kind of been reclaimed by trans academics and people who write about the history of trans people as one of like the first instances of a trans person in English from medieval times, which is really interesting. Eleanor was a sex worker and a seamstress and an embroiderer, things like that. So she has this character of Eleanor whose eyes she works through, but she also has these characters of these other saints that she brings into it, saints who have been like female saints who have been marginalized for different reasons. And it's all kind of about this story of womanhood and gender and sexuality and how they blend together. But then she also talks so closely about grief and about losing her father and also about COVID and the isolation of it and the process of it. And it's all within this amazing language that's very literary, but also very worshipful and asking all of the kind of big questions about who we are in the universe and why we're here and what we're doing, why we're doing. And it just moves so much. It's such an interesting collection. It works beautifully and fluidly. It has poems that are in the tone of kind of Chaucer, you know, from like the medieval period, but then it has a really stark poem, which is, you know, Eleanor as a trans teenage girl and, you know, really focusing on the narratives of trans young people who have been murdered and subject of hate crimes. So it really shifts really quickly. So it's a wild ride. And for anyone who loves poetry, I highly recommend it. It's getting a lot of buzz in poetry circles, which is utterly deserved. And it's just beautiful. So beautiful. It makes me a little bit emotional. It makes me a little bit emotional to like talk about it because Rachel is such an incredible writer and like her work just deserves to be given accolades, really. I just want her. I'm like, Rachel for poet laureate. That's what I want in my lifetime. I want Rachel to be a poet laureate.
No, but it's really nice that you're getting to shout about her work because I know that she's been a big support and influence on your writing work.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And
that's always nice.
yeah, she's been such like she's been such a writing mentor to me, and the knowing is dedicated to her actually, and she's so supportive of everything that's going on in my career, and it's just really nice to be able to be in this position to be like, yeah, this what she's doing is so powerful
Hmm.
and so wonderful. And we went to the Forward Poetry Prizes together, so we know how small poetry is as a
Yeah.
world, and how little like money there is, and in a way how little recognition, like
Hmm.
like we're talking about like the women's prize, and that's like such a big prize, but the poetry prizes, comparatively, it's much smaller kind of circles
Hmm.
that they're moving in, so it's great to be able to give a book which is maybe not going to get as much like the big national recognition in the way that something that's like a Waterstones bestseller
Yeah.
might do, to kind of push it. And just encourage people, read more poetry, just give it a go.
So true.
People are frightened of poetry, I think it's a holdover from GCSE.
I was frightened of it, but I think, yeah, you're right. It's the GCSE anthology
Yeah.
situation.
Yeah.
But I've definitely got into a lot of new poetry in the last like
Yeah.
year or so, thanks
I
to the
think
podcast as well. But
yeah.
yeah.
I think once you realize that no one's actually going to test me on it, no one's going to test me on it, and it's okay if I read something and I'm just like, I don't understand that.
Me.
I didn't understand that. And then you move on to the next one, or you come back and you think about it, and it maybe illuminates itself. Poetry is, yeah, it's a bit like that, isn't it? You
Mhm.
sometimes have to give it time to settle. So yeah,
Sure.
don't be afraid of the poets. No one's grading
Don't
you.
be afraid.
What have you got? You got another book, or what you got?
I am going to recommend a TV series, Mr.
Yes.
Bates versus the Post Office, which
Oh.
was an ITV series, I believe. I was very naughty and watched it where I shouldn't have, but it is available on ITV Player, I believe, ITVX, whatever you call it. It is such an incredible series. It will make you so furious.
Mm.
It is one of the biggest miscarriages of justice in British history. How this I mean, it's still ongoing. It's like horrendous that this has even
Mm.
happened. But the series coming out forced some sort of change
Yeah,
because
yeah, it's been crazy.
they stripped. I mean, I can't remember her name, but I don't really care to remember her name because she was a dick. But the woman that was like the CEO of the post office, who had like is it CBE or something?
An OBE?
Maybe she was given something like that, and she had it stripped from her.
Queen giveth
Yes,
award
and it was
taken away.
stripped away because she was awful and she knew these things were happening. And I think the casting of this was incredible. I love Julie Hesmondhalgh. She can do no wrong. She was amazing in it. There are so many great actors in there. There's Will Mellor, Toby Jones, who played Alan Bates.
Oh yeah, Toby Jones can do no wrong either, really. Like
So
everything he
good.
does.
So good.
Oh.
Monica Dolan, who played one of the postmistresses, she was phenomenal. Like the story of the woman that she played, it's just heartbreaking. It is genuinely like one of the saddest things I've ever heard of, but it's really important that we watch these things because it's a true story. There's so many people whose lives were affected by this. People lost their jobs, people lost their mortgages, people's families were torn apart. There was divorces because they were in such horrendous amounts of debt. People were sent to prison over this. People took their own lives because of this. Like it's honestly like one of the most horrendous things that's ever happened. And the fact that it's not a complete open closed situation is just
Mm.
astonishing to me. So I found that incredibly moving. I think it's only 4 episodes. It's not an easy watch, but I think it's a really important watch,
Mm.
and they've done a really great job of putting that on screen.
It's
Yeah,
amazing, isn't it?
yeah,
That it really reminds you of the impact that art can have on the
exactly.
world, and the impact that TV can have
Hmm.
in such a positive way. And I think we have kind of been accustomed a little bit to like the negative impacts of TV and film sometimes. And this is a really good reminder that actually, no, this can be an amazing thing for getting the word out about things, and making a situation, bringing light to a situation that has been kind of kept in the darkness. It's very, very cool. I'm excited to watch it.
Yeah, and this is why we should fund the arts.
This is where we should fund the arts. Yeah. And unlike you, I have ITVX, so I can.
You are a good citizen. Well done. You need to tell me when you've watched it, but I just know it's going to make you cry a lot because it's a very emotional watch. But yeah, I think you'll enjoy it.
So love docuseries, like dramatized docuseries is just my absolute favorite thing.
So good.
I live for it.
Is this your last recommendation?
It's a bit of an odd one.
Okay, let's hear it.
But something that I did kind of, I think at the start of March, which I really recommend for anybody kind of living in the world at the moment right now, is that I stopped getting news from the BBC and places like that. And I started following Al Jazeera and other broadcasting networks on Instagram and Facebook. And it's made a huge difference to how I understand everything to do with what's going on in Gaza at the moment, but also understanding global conflicts in a different way. And the fact that if you follow, like the way that the news is reported in this country globally, I perhaps stupidly hadn't realized was still very Eurocentric in a way. And the fact that, you know, what's going on in Sudan and in other countries around the world wasn't like really being reported for months in British media before, but Al Jazeera was reporting on it for months and months before it happened. And I also find that like there's a general like broadcasting bias, which I'm sure lots of people already know about, but if you don't, in British media, in how they talk about the conflict in Gaza, just literally in the scripted words that they use. So they are unlikely to use words like killed or murdered to refer to Gazans, and they try not to use words like women and children. So they will use like just like people, like they will say like people or persons or suspects or anything that basically humanizes Gazans. And it's really interesting that we have that bias going on in British media at the moment. I mean, some broadcasting places are better than others, but in Al Jazeera and it's also a renowned global news organization, and they are the people who still have journalists in Gaza, which makes a massive difference to the quality of information that they are getting, and makes you much more aware of actually what's happening to people and into the situation at the moment. And I think that's just really important to get as good information as possible. So I highly recommend. And Al Jazeera English is an easy follow on Instagram. Yeah, it's a really quick change to make, and it makes a really big difference to how you perceive world news, really.
I think that's a really great recommendation, Em.
You're so welcome.
I will be doing just that. I have a final recommendation, and that is another book. It's a non-fiction book, and it was a book that was on the Women's Prize for Non-Fiction longlist.
Oh, do tell.
I'm going to very briefly talk about this because this was picked by our patrons for our Patreon book club, and this is Matrescence by Lucy Jones. This was such an incredible book. It's, as is the same with a lot of non-fiction books, that they've got to get through a lot of information, so they can be quite dense. But this was such a great split between the facts and her personal experiences. And the way that she merged the two was just really readable. I don't know if that's the right way to describe it, but you can just tell it was like really thoroughly researched. Like nobody could argue with the things that she was saying, because she was talking about her experience prenatal and postnatal, and how her experience didn't line up with this sort of story narrative that she'd been sold by society about like what motherhood would look like, and what being pregnant and childbirth and all the rest of it would look like. You know, we're kind of missold that. We're told that that's what we should want as women.
Yeah.
And often we're not given actual facts and information that would help us go through that experience. And you know, there's a lot of people that might have read it if it was purely coming from a memoir perspective, which it is a memoir, but it's also a non-fiction book. But I think they would read just her experiences purely and try and argue her point, because people like to tell women that what they're feeling is wrong.
Yeah.
Whereas she comes with the facts. And she comes with the statistics, and it just can't be argued with. And there's so much in there that is just completely infuriating. There's a lot about how women's bodies are treated in healthcare, which I know you know all too well, unfortunately.
Oh,
Um,
yes.
there's a lot about mental illness in pre and postnatal women and how her mental health was impacted by this experience
Mm,
and the sort of how she felt unable to express that to her doctors because of the way things were being asked. And there's so much in there. It's a really important book. There was a really infuriating bit about transport. And I know
mm,
that you especially, and I hope you don't mind me saying this, but you as somebody that lives with chronic pain, chronic illness, like, you will know that public transport in the UK isn't the most accessible of places. And this kind of became very apparent when I was reading about, she talks about taking her baby for the first time on a train and how bikes are allowed on trains but prams aren't. And
Jesus.
she had to buy a second ticket for her baby, even though you shouldn't have to buy a ticket for a child under a certain age, because she needed to be able to lay out all of the things and trust that she would have the space next to her.
Mm,
And then they got to the train platform, like they arrived, and the lift was broken at the platform, and the only option was the stairs.
mm,
And the only person available to help her with the pram was like the somebody that worked for the train
mm,
station. And she said, "Can you help me with the pram?" And he said, "Sorry, health and safety issues, I can't." And she was like, "What
mm,
do you expect me to do? How I can't get up there?" And he said, "You're just gonna have to wait until somebody comes and helps you, like a member of the public." And
mm.
I was just like, what, like,
Yeah.
planet are we living on where that's how we're treating women and how we're treating like fellow human beings? Like,
Mm.
what the fuck is this? So yeah, there's a lot in there that really enraged me. I said I wasn't going to talk about this for ages, but I feel a lot of things about it. I promised to our patrons that we're going to have a full, a much bigger conversation about this, but it is just a really great book. And
Yeah, it sounds
yeah,
great.
I would
I
highly
will
recommend.
I will read.
Yes, I
I'd
will
be excited.
lend you
I'd
my
be
copy.
excited to read it, I think. It sounds like something I'd be excited to read. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm never ever gonna have a baby, so it'd be interesting to be like, I was right.
Yeah.
It
Oh,
sounds
you will definitely
terrible.
feel like, I was like, have I made the right choice to think about having children? I don't know. So yeah, lots of scary stuff
Yeah.
in there, but she does also talk about like the joy of being a mother, but she doesn't shy away at all from all the negative
Yeah.
experiences. And I think it's important that women are given the full picture and the full information, because
Yeah.
it's a huge choice that you're making for the like it's a choice that's going to impact the rest of your life. So you
Yeah.
need to be given all the facts and information, and it's wrong that so many women aren't. So yeah,
Well,
have a
yeah,
look.
I think it all comes down to body autonomy, doesn't it? And
Hmm.
women deserve to have full autonomy over their bodies.
We do.
And that autonomy includes being able to live in a society with the choice you have made for your body and for your health.
Hmm.
So if you have made a choice not to have a baby, then you should be able to exist in a society without stigma. And if you have chosen to have a baby, it should be possible for you to exist in a society in a healthy way
Hmm.
with that child, raising that child to be part of the society.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's just, I think it sounds like what she's highlighting is that society is not formed for women ultimately,
Hmm.
either childbearing or not. And yeah, that's a problem.
It is a huge problem. We have been speaking for a very long time. I feel sorry for my future self editing this. We have given all of our
Oh my
recommendations.
God.
Thank you, Emma, for joining me on this long journey of recommending things and talking about the month's culture. Very much enjoyed having you on as my co-host today.
During a co-host.
Okay, we're done. Emma, where can our listeners find you on social media, please?
Instagram is the best place to find me because I can only cope with one kind of social media at a time. So I am Elf Reads on Instagram, ELPHREADS.
Gorgeous. And if you would like to give us a follow, you can do so at A Pair of Bookends Pod on Instagram and at Pair of Bookends on Twitter and TikTok. For exclusive content, you can go on our Patreon. And if you enjoyed this episode, please do rate, review, and subscribe, as it helps us hugely. And we will see you next time. So long, farewell, Emma Hinds. It's been emotional.
Bye. Been emotion.